What if I told you that Jesus didn't walk on water just to demonstrate power? That this moment, recorded in the pages of the gospel, hides a spiritual code so profound that it can completely redefine your faith and transform the way you face the greatest abysses in your life. Most people know this story as an astonishing miracle, a supernatural act to prove he was the Son of God. But what if that wasn't the only reason? What if, behind every step Jesus took on those turbulent waves, there was a silent invitation? A message destined to cross centuries and reach you right now. You may think you already know what this passage means, but I need to warn you. What you're about to hear here isn't what is typically preached from pulpits or taught in Sunday school. This isn't just a beautiful episode to inspire. It's a revelation that can change the way you read the Bible. And, more importantly, the way you walk in moments when everything seems to be sinking. Picture the scene. It's night. The wind blows violently. The waves rise like liquid walls, threatening to swallow the boat at any moment. Hardened men, experienced fishermen, struggle to maintain control, but their arms are already tired. Amidst this chaos, a figure appears. At first, just a distant shadow. Then, footsteps. Footsteps on the water. There is no sound of oars, no boat, just him, advancing as if the laws of nature cannot touch him. And this is where many stop and think. Jesus is God. He can do anything, but that is not the main point. What we need to understand is because he chose to appear this way. Why didn't he calm the storm from afar? Why didn't he appear right in the boat? Why did he walk over the very symbol of fear and death to reach them? Throughout this video, you'll discover answers that perhaps no one has told you. You'll understand the hidden meaning behind this act and how it connects to other passages of Scripture that reveal the true identity of Christ. You'll realize that this story isn't just about what happened 2,000 years ago, but about what's happening in your life now. And if you want to continue receiving messages like this, which not only tell the story, but reveal what's behind it, take advantage and subscribe to the channel and activate the bell. Because that way, every time we bring a revelation like this, you'll be the first to receive it. And leave your like too, because when you do, you help this message reach people who may be sinking today. And who knows, might be the reason someone walks on water again. Get ready, because in the next few minutes, we'll delve into the setting, the context, the subtext of this passage, and you'll realize that every detail has a purpose. It wasn't by chance that Jesus chose that moment, that sea, that storm. And when you see what he was really showing, you might discover that, even on the darkest days, the storm isn't your end, but the stage where the most profound revelation can happen. When we look at that night on the Sea of Galilee, we can't just imagine a calm lake under the moonlight. We need to see what the disciples saw and feel what they felt. Because the setting wasn't a neutral detail, was part of the message. The Sea of Galilee, also called the Lake of Gennesaret, isn't vast like an ocean. But it has a dangerous peculiarity. It's located in a geographical depression, surrounded by hills. This creates a natural phenomenon. Sudden winds sweep down with force, churning the surface within minutes. Fishermen in that region knew this danger well, and that was exactly what was happening that early morning. But to understand the weight of this scene, we need to understand something about the Jewish mentality of the time. For them, the sea symbolized more than water and depth. The sea represented chaos, instability, and even hostile spiritual forces. In ancient texts, the deep waters were often associated with dragons, sea monsters, and powers that opposed God. It is no coincidence that in the book of Genesis, before anything existed, the Spirit of God was hovering over the waters there. God not only created, but also brought order where there was confusion. Therefore, when the disciples faced that storm, it was not just a struggle against the wind. It was ancestral, cultural, and spiritual fear manifesting before them. The choppy water was not just a physical obstacle. It was the symbol of chaos trying to swallow their faith. Now, imagine the atmosphere. The boat creaking, the ropes taut, each crashing wave seems to want to turn everything upside down. The night is deep, and there is no light beyond what the moon can reflect through the clouds racing across the sky. The men take turns at the oars, but progress is slow. Every splash on their faces is a cold warning. You won't make it, and Jesus is not in the boat. Earlier in the evening, he had dismissed the crowd and gone up the mountain alone to pray. He knew they would be at sea. He knew the wind would pick up. He knew the progress would be difficult. But he chose not to be physically with them at that first moment. This absence wasn't carelessness, it was preparation. Perhaps here we can draw a parallel with our own lives. How often do we feel exactly like this? Fighting against forces greater than ourselves without God's visible presence at our side, asking, why isn't he here now? It's easy to forget that even when we can't see him, he sees everything. The Gospels say that around the fourth watch of the night, that is, between 3 and 6 a.m., Jesus decided to go to them. This means the disciples had already been fighting the wind for hours. It wasn't a passing breeze. It was persistent. And perhaps this is the first lesson of this scenario. Before the miracle, there is resistance. Before the revelation, there is struggle. And here we come to a detail few realize. The moment Jesus chose to appear was not random. In the ancient world, dawn was symbolically associated with the hour of greatest darkness, the moment when the darkness seemed densest. But it was also seen as the hour before dawn. In other words, he appears at the lowest point of their journey, to avoid the storm, but to walk through it with them. Now think about this. If the sea was seen as chaos and the wind as resistance, what does it mean for Jesus to walk on these waters? He doesn't come merely as a teacher or prophet. He comes as the Lord himself, trampling upon that which threatens us. The setting, therefore, is more than a backdrop. It is the perfect stage to reveal who he truly is. But before we delve into this deeper meaning, let's dwell for a moment on what the disciples feel when they see him. They don't recognize him right away. They scream in fear, thinking he's a ghost. This reveals something important. Sometimes, when God approaches us in a way we don't expect, we may not realize it's him. Fear distorts our vision. The setting can deceive us. And perhaps you've experienced this yourself. You're in the midst of a struggle, asking for God's help, but when something happens, it doesn't seem like the answer. It's strange, unusual, even frightening. But, like that night, it's him coming to you, ... only over the very waters that threaten to drown you. Therefore, understanding the setting is essential. It's not an irrelevant detail. It's the framework for the message. The storm, the sea, the initial absence, the dawn, everything is connected so that when the miracle happens, its significance is impossible to ignore. And now that we understand the weight of this scenario, we can move on to the next layer of this story. Discovering that the storm was not just an obstacle to be overcome, but a test designed to reveal the faith and shape the hearts of the disciples. Because the next step of this journey is not just about surviving the night, but about understanding why the Master chose this particular night to act as he did. The wind did not cease. The waves continued to rise like walls of water before them. But there was something even more challenging than the sea. It was Jesus' silence until that moment. In the previous chapter, we saw that he was deliberately not in the boat from the beginning. This absence was not carelessness nor delay. It was intentional. And here is the truth that many avoid saying. There are times when God chooses to remain at a seeming distance, not to punish us, but to prepare us. The disciples were accustomed to Jesus' physical presence. He was with them in the miracles, in the crowds, in the roadside conversations. But now they were facing something without his immediate intervention. This creates an environment where faith must cease to be a comfortable emotion and become a firm decision. And perhaps it's the same in your life. You pray, seek, cry out, and nothing seems to change. The storm continues. The wind persists, and you wonder, has he forgotten me? But, like that dawn, He wasn't absent out of ignorance. He was watching. He knew the strength of the wind. He saw the struggle, and he knew exactly the right moment to act. The Gospels show us that he appears around the fourth watch, the darkest hours before dawn. This teaches us something fundamental. Often, the answer comes at the point where we think we can't do it anymore. It's as if he's saying, now that you realize you can't overcome alone, now that you understand the boat isn't enough, now that weariness makes you look beyond your strength, ... now I come. But the test isn't just about waiting. It's about how we react while we wait. The disciples were rowing against the wind, and the text indicates that the boat was in the middle of the sea, neither close to departure nor close to arrival. It's the place where turning back is no longer an option, but moving forward seems impossible. This is the territory of testing. Perhaps you are in this middle of the sea today. You can't go back to the way things were, but moving forward seems to require more than you have. This is where many give up. This is where fear and doubt gain a voice. But it's also here that Jesus' presence reveals itself most powerfully. When he appears, walking on the water, the disciples' initial reaction is one of terror. It's a ghost. This shows us that, in the midst of testing, even God's answer can seem frightening. When he comes in a way we didn't expect, our first reaction might be rejection, distrust, or even fear. But Jesus' voice cuts through the noise of the wind. Take courage. It is I, do not be afraid. These words don't just calm, they reorient. In the midst of the test, his presence redefines our perception of reality. The wind continues. The waves don't calm immediately, but something changes. The awareness that he is there. And here's something many don't realize. Jesus could have calmed the sea from a distance, as he did before. He could have appeared instantly in the boat, as in other miracles. But he chooses to cross the very chaos to meet them. This isn't just power, it's a message. What threatens you doesn't stop me. What sinks you, I tread on. The test, therefore, isn't about enduring until everything is over, but about learning to see God's presence in the midst of what hasn't yet changed. It's about realizing that the storm doesn't determine the outcome. It reveals how much we trust the voice that says, "It is I." Peter, in the midst of this scene, reacts in an unexpected way. He doesn't just breathe a sigh of relief that Jesus is there. He says, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." This is extraordinary. At the height of the test, when logic would dictate clinging to the boat, Peter asks to leave. This moment is a watershed moment, literally. It shows that the test is not just about surviving, but about daring to trust beyond what is safe. Peter realizes that if Jesus can walk through chaos, then, if he commands, any disciple can too. But before we delve into Peter's step, which will be the focus of the chapter on the people impossible step, we need to understand that this request was only possible because there was a test. Without Jesus' initial absence, without the headwind, without the physical and emotional exhaustion, Peter might never have dared to ask for something like this. The test shapes. The test exposes. The test creates the space where faith ceases to be theory and becomes practice. It is uncomfortable, but it is necessary. And perhaps, as you listen to me now, you are realizing that the headwind you face is not just random resistance. It is a test. And how you respond to it can open the door to a miracle that goes beyond simply getting to the other side. Because in the next step of this story, the test will become an invitation. And when Peter steps out of the boat, it won't be just him who will be tested. We will all be confronted with the same question. How far do I trust? Peter was still in the boat. The wind was blowing fiercely. The sea was relentless. And yet, there was Jesus, walking upon the very thing everyone feared. It was more than an act of power. It was a living symbol. A spiritual code was being revealed before their eyes, but to understand it, we would need to go back centuries. From the earliest texts of Scripture, deep waters have symbolized chaos and the unknown. In Genesis 1, before creation was formed, the Spirit of God hovered over the waters. This detail isn't poetic just for its beauty. It carries the message that God is not threatened by chaos. He hovers over it, rules over it. Throughout the Old Testament, we see this pattern again and again. In Exodus, the Red Sea parts before Moses, showing that God has authority over the abyss. In Job 9:8, it is written, "He alone stretches out the heavens and treads upon the waves of the sea." In the Psalms, we find statements that God calms the seas and defeats the monsters that inhabit the deep waters, symbols of the forces of evil. These images weren't just stories for the Jews. They shaped their understanding of the spiritual world. The sea was the place where evil lurked, where disorder reigned. So when Jesus appears walking on the sea, he's not just physically moving from one point to another. He's enacting, before them, God's own sovereignty over all the forces that threaten life. And note something important. He didn't choose to walk on calm waters. He chose the moment when the sea was most turbulent. This shows us that the manifestation of who he is doesn't happen in the absence of problems, but precisely at their peak. It's in the chaos that his glory becomes most evident. This is the spiritual code. What threatens you is the very place where he reveals his authority. The sea that frightened the disciples became the ground beneath the Master's feet. And, spiritually speaking, what seems to be sinking you today can become the platform upon which God will display his power in your life. But there's another detail we need to realize. The text tells us that Jesus wanted to pass by them. This phrase is curious and has already generated debate. But in the biblical context, passing by recalls what God did with Moses and Elijah revelations, where he passed before his servants to reveal himself in a special way. It is as if Jesus were recreating the moment when God manifests himself in glory, but now in flesh and blood, in the midst of a storm. This act was not just to solve a practical problem, it was a spiritual declaration. I am the same one who parted the sea, the same one who controls the waves, the same one who is above all chaos. When he says it is I in the original I am, he is using the same words with which God introduced himself to Moses in the burning bush. This is too profound to be accidental. Jesus was not just calming hearts, he was revealing his divine identity. This is the code. The miracle is not just about power, it is about identity. He walks on the water so you know he is the God who reigns over all waters. And here comes the part that changes our perspective. If this act is about identity, then our response to him must go beyond admiration. It's not enough to say, "How amazing." The true calling is to recognize who he is and, from there, respond with faith. That's why Peter asks to go to him. Because if the Master is the one who rules the sea, then being with him even outside the boat, safer than remaining where logic dictates is the right place. Perhaps, spiritually, this is the most challenging point for us today. It's easier to admire Jesus' power from afar than to accept the invitation to walk on what scares us. But when we understand the spiritual code, we realize that the purpose is not just for him to demonstrate power, it's to teach us to live under that same dominion. And here's another layer of the code. Jesus doesn't calm the storm before calling Peter. The wind continues, the waves continue. This shows us that the goal is not to create a perfect environment for faith, but to teach how to live by faith in the midst of an imperfect environment. If we wait for the sea to calm down before acting, we will never take the step. The code is this. His presence transforms any place into solid ground. Doesn't matter if it's a stony floor or a raging sea. What sustains us is not what's under our feet, but what's in front of our eyes. This revelation changes everything, because if it's true that he is the Lord over chaos, then there's no scenario where he doesn't have control. And if he calls you out of the boat, it's not to sink you, it's to show you that, with him, even the deepest waters become a path. But there's one final detail we need to keep in mind before moving on to the next scene. Understanding the code doesn't exempt us from trials. Peter will discover this when he takes the first step. Knowing who Jesus is gives us courage to begin, but it's in the movement that faith is tested. And it's precisely there that we'll see the maximum tension in this story. The night is still heavy. The wind continues to blow as if trying to push each man's faith to the bottom of the sea. And, in the midst of it all, a detail emerges that will forever change the story of this scene. Among all the disciples, only one decides to speak up. Peter, the one who often talked too much. The one who had been hasty more than once. But this time, his rashness isn't the result of fear or doubted as the result of something much rarer. The explosive mix of boldness and the desire to prove his devotion. Imagine the scene. An ordinary man inside a shaky boat, looking at someone walking on water. He's not content to simply observe the impossible. He wants to be part of it. And then, with a voice that was probably lost for a moment in the roar of the wind and waves, Peter cries out, "Lord, if it's you, command me to come to you on the water." This phrase isn't just a request, it's a challenge. It's as if Peter were saying, "I believe so much that you are the Son of God that I refuse to be trapped in the boat. I want to experience the supernatural with you." And that's when Jesus responds with a single word, "Come." This answer is simple, but it carries cosmic weight. Jesus doesn't explain how Peter will be able to walk on water. He doesn't hand him a manual on divine physics. He doesn't guarantee that everything will work out. He simply gives an order. And this order requires something that few in history have had the courage to offer: a step into the void. Now, think of the scene in slow motion. Peter leans on the edge of the boat, his body still trembling from the cold and fear. The waves crash against the wood. His companions look at him, perhaps in disbelief, perhaps curious. And then, with a movement that disobeys every instinct of self-preservation, he lifts his leg and steps. Not on solid wood, not on sand, but on the raging sea. It's the impossible step. This step is more than physical. It's symbolic. It represents the total surrender of faith, the abandonment of safe ground, the act of trusting even when everything inside us screams to retreat. Peter is saying, "I believe that if he commands, I can." But, as we know, human faith is fragile. And when Peter looks away from Jesus' steady gaze, when he lets go of the source of his strength, he begins to sink. The sea, which for an instant was ground, becomes an enemy again. This moment is crucial for all of us. It shows that faith is not a permanent and unshakable state. It is a process. It has ups and downs, moments of steadfastness and moments of doubt. There is no shame in sinking, but there is victory in crying out for help and being rescued. Peter cries out, "Lord, save me." And Jesus, without hesitation, reaches out and catches him. The miracle is not just that Peter walked on water, but that he was rescued in his hour of weakness. This is hope for all of us. We don't need to be perfect to experience the supernatural. We don't need to walk on water with complete trust from the start. We just need to begin, look to Jesus, and when we falter, call for help. What's more, Jesus doesn't rebuke Peter. He holds him lovingly and says, "O you of little faith, why did you doubt?" This question isn't a condemnation, but an invitation to grow. To understand that faith needs to be nurtured, that it's normal to waver, but the important thing is to never stop seeking. This is the heart of the message. Walking on water is a process. The miracle happens when we take the first step, when we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, and when we accept His help in difficult times. If we apply this to our lives, we will understand that every storm we face is an opportunity to walk closer to the impossible, to experience the supernatural, to experience God's love and power in our fragility. And it is in this spirit that we conclude this journey. The story of Jesus walking on water is not just an ancient tale. It is a living message, destined to transform whoever chooses to hear it. Now, stop for a moment and imagine yourself in that boat. You are surrounded by howling wind, waves threatening to turn everything upside down, the cold piercing your skin. But in the midst of this chaos, there is a presence steadfast, unchanging, walking on the water and drawing near. This presence is Jesus. What would you do? Would you be afraid, like the disciples? Would you cry out, "It's a ghost"? Or, like Peter, dare to take the first step? The decision you make today before this image can define the course of your life. Because this moment is not just an old story told for entertainment, it is a living invitation to transform your reality. Remember, the raging sea is not your enemy, but the stage for your miracle. The storm has not come to sink you, but to reveal how much you can trust in the presence of the one who rules the waters. You are not alone in this struggle. Jesus is extending his hand to you right now, saying, "Courage. It is I, do not be afraid." If you accept this invitation, you will step out of the boat of doubt, fear, and stagnation. You will take firm steps toward the impossible, knowing that even if the waves try to pull you under, God's hand will be there to hold you. So, make a choice now. If this video touched your heart, leave a like so more people can discover this life-changing truth. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell so you don't want to miss any revelation that brings you closer to your greater purpose. Here, we offer no empty promises, but the raw, transformative truth that shapes warriors of faith and courage. Come walk with us on this journey of profound discoveries and real victories. Always remember, the true meaning of Jesus walking on water is much more than a miracle. It is the eternal symbol that, with faith, you can master what seemed impossible because he has already mastered chaos for you. Until the next video, and may the courage to step out of the boat never abandon you.